Your life is not about you. Your life is about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. But when you experience your life in that way, you encounter the universal truth we've been talking about. Because as you experience others and treat others the way you feel is the best way you could possibly treat them, it comes back to you because it turns out in truth, there is only one of us.
Welcome to New Earth Podcast, where we dive into inspiring stories, profound wisdom, and insights from remarkable individuals who are driving the consciousness shift on our planet. If you're ready to elevate your awareness and well-being, you're in the right place. But before we dive into today's episode, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. Together, we'll continue to explore the ideas and conversations that help you up-level your consciousness. Thank you so much for your support and your comments and for being part of this journey. Hi, everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome back Neale Donald Walsch onto the podcast. Neale is an author, a spiritual teacher, best known for his Conversation with God series, which has been translated into dozens of languages and has influenced millions of readers around the world. In his latest book, Letters to a Young Seeker, Departing Thoughts from an Elder, he offers a series of reflections written as letters to young seekers. And whilst personal in tone, the insights are clearly intended for anyone who's navigating deeper questions about life's meaning and purpose. And rather than presenting fixed answers, Neale offers us ideas as invitations, encouraging us to question, reflect, and perhaps reconsider the frameworks through which we experience our lives. Welcome, Neale. So delighted to meet you again.
Thank you, Sarah. It's wonderful to be here with you as well. How may I serve you?
Well, I have to say, I did really enjoy your latest book. I have to say, I started off feeling very complimented because it was addressed to dear young seekers. But then when I got into it a little bit further and you clarified that it was meant for people in their 20s, 30s and 40s, I thought I was maybe reading it a little bit too late. But then I gained such deep understanding from the book that I thought maybe I'm a slow starter or coming from so far behind that I'm still catching up in my 50s.
Well, you know what? It's for young seekers and people who are young at heart.
Okay, that's me. I'll take that one. Well, it's a beautiful, beautiful book, Neale. Before we get into some of the inspirations and awarenesses in the book, I'd love to find out what inspired you to write this book.
Well, my wife had the idea. It was her idea. My wife is an award-winning poet, and she had a dream one night about the poet named Rilke, who wrote a series of letters to a young poet who had written to him wanting to get some tips on how to become a good poet. So he wrote a series of letters to this young poet, and the young poet actually published the letters in a book called Letters to a Young Poet. And my wife actually had a dream about it. She was thinking about it in her mind one night, and she told me the next day, you know what? You should write a book, Letters to a Young Seeker, that would help people in the earlier half of their adult life maybe embrace and encounter some information that you wish you had when you were in your 20s, 30s, or 40s. I said, that's a wonderful idea. So I sat down and I wrote the book. Really, it's just a series of 21 short letters. 21 very brief letters, 2 or 3 pages long, in a book pages, so not very long. And but each letter contains one of the most important life-changing messages in my conversations with God experience, which I had in the early 90s. So I included the 21 most important messages from the 3,000-page dialogue that I included in my Conversations with God books. And so I kind of like summarized it. And the book, Letters to a Young Seeker, is a very small book, very thin. You can read it in an hour and a half. You can read it over a weekend easily. But it contains what I think are life-changing messages that I wish, honestly, things I wish I knew when I was in my 20s, 30s, or 40s. Why did I have to wait until I was in my 50s or 60s to understand some of these mysteries of life? So that's what the book is about. Things I wish I knew when I was 20, 30, or 40.
Well, it's a beautiful book, Neale, and I'm very grateful to have read it. And I wish I would have also had it when I was a bit younger, but I'm very grateful to have received it now. And I had quite a lot of aha moments that kind of filled some of the gaps for me. One of those was very early on in the book. You spoke about, there's no inherent meaning. It's the meaning that we assign to things that counts. I know those weren't your precise words, but that was the gist of it. And this was a bit of an aha moment for me, because we have so much conditioning in our world, and so much of our thinking and so much of our assignment of meaning is not our own. It comes from our culture, from our upbringing. So I guess what you're talking about when you bring up this piece is that kind of reframing of what are our values, what is the meaning of this event for us individually in each moment. And that's a really beautiful process that really allows a lot of undoing. Is that something that you can speak to, Neale?
Well, you've said everything that I would say.
Have I got you out of a job there, Neale?
The statement in the book is very simple. Nothing has any meaning save the meaning we give it. And so I agree with everything you've just said. And what I've learned in my life is that many factors exterior to myself were offering meanings to events in my life. My religious upbringing as a child, my cultural story that the culture of those of us in this world are embracing, my financial position back 30 or 40 years ago, and even my political points of view. Was I conservative? Was I liberal? What is my political point of view? All of these factors were assigning meanings to the experiences that I was having. So, just to give you an example, when my first marriage failed, I let my culture assign the meaning to that. And the culture told me that I was a failure. I'm a failure as a man, failure as a person. I couldn't keep a good relationship together. What's the matter with me anyway? What's my problem? And it turns out that was the real meaning of the event at all.
Yes.
And so I have learned through the years to give the events of my life the meaning that my soul experiences, not my mind.
And that's incredible, because that we can almost then rewrite our life story in an instant and make it, rather than a tragedy, into whatever we wish, a miracle,
a
whatever
learning.
we wish.
It's a growth experience. Life is a process of growth, in my opinion. It's a process of evolution, but it's not a process of failure. As a matter of fact, one of the illusions of humans is that failure exists. I was told in my conversations with God, there's no such thing as failure. There's only expansion and growth.
What I'm finding really interesting about this conversation, Neale, is the next question that comes up for me is there really any objective reality then, if the meaning is that which we assign to it, or is it really a series of interpretations, and that we're actually then recreating the interpretations we choose, and then kind of what impact does that have not only on ourselves but on our world when we choose differently from that which we were conditioned to believe?
That's a very profound question. Is there such a thing as an objective reality if each of us are assigning individual meanings to the events of life? Not just to events of my personal life, but events of my worldly experience. And my answer is yes. There is such a thing as an objective meaning, but it's not the objective meaning that comes from our mind. In my understanding, it's the objective meaning that comes from the soul. The soul contains wisdom, in my experience. The mind contains rationalizations given to us, as we mentioned, by everybody else. Everybody else's rationalization. So I have learned that if I really want to understand what something really means objectively, I need to listen to my soul, and I need to be literally out of my mind. People have said to me more than once, "What, Neale, are you out of your mind?" And the answer is yes. I'm out of my mind. I try to stay out of my mind. I try to separate myself from the many thoughts that my mind has collected through the years. As I mentioned, from my religion, my political party, my economic status, the country in which I live. I live in the United States, you live in Portugal, and so we have vastly different cultural ideas about many things. For instance, in America, we think that popsicles are wonderful, and in Portugal, they throw them away.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? The whole cultural, what is acceptable and what's okay and what's not okay. And if we're making those decisions based on our culture, they can lead to conflict.
And
you're suggesting that if we sit outside of that and we listen to our soul, it becomes much more objective. So that's when you're speaking of soul, you're not speaking about religion and kind of, the scriptures. You're talking about that inner knowing. And my next question is, because you've spoken about, the assignment of meaning, who is the I that is assigning the meaning?
In my experience and in my understanding, it is the part of us that is spiritual, our spiritual being. My true identity, I'm not this. This is not who I am. I'm not my body. And I'm not my mind. My body and my mind are simply tools, pieces of equipment that are used by who I really am in order to express and to experience my true identity. Who I really am is I'm a spiritual being. I'm not a physical being. That's just That's just who I am at this particular point in time. But there will come a moment when I leave my body and I have what people call death. I don't call it death. It's simply a change of address. I don't cease to exist. I don't stop existing. I simply move from the physical realm to the spiritual realm. And I go back to heaven. I go back to God. I'm home with God. And I'm in a place of pure bliss, freedom, joy, and love. And then I can make a decision to return to the physical realm if I feel it would serve my soul to do so in order to expand and to experience more of the process that we call evolution. If I could evolve into a grander and grander experience of my true identity as an individual expression of divinity. I was told in my conversations with God that every sentient being in the universe is an individuation of divinity. We are all simply individual expressions, or what I call a singularization of the singularity. There's only one thing. All things are part of the one thing there is. We are all part of each other. We are all one. And if we began to live that way, our life and our world would change for the better forever. I could, of course, be wrong about all of this, but I don't think so.
Thank you so much, Neale. I feel very humbled to receive this beautiful transmission from you. And there are quite a few points that I'd like to kind of pick up on. One was that you spoke about, I might have to ask a few questions in one go here, by the way, otherwise I'm going to forget. One was that you spoke about if we choose to return again as a soul. And, you know, many of us listening here might just think, we're absolutely nuts. Why would we choose this? You know, there's so much suffering, there's so many challenges.
I can answer the question.
What you're suggesting is a reframing of that as well, you know, in terms of that evolution.
Yeah, to answer your first question, why would we choose to come back? Because in the realm of the physical, we encounter what I would call a contextual field. That is, everything exists contextually, who we are and who we are not. In the realm of the spiritual, who we are not does not exist. Only who we are exists. We are love, joy, happiness, peace, freedom. We are an individual expression of the divine. And that's the only thing we experience in the realm of the spiritual. We come to the realm of the physical because in the realm of the physical, there is also that which we are not.
Yes.
And we need that which we are not if we want to experience that which we are. Because in the absence of that which we are not, if that which we are not does not exist, we can't experience what we are. A perfect example of this, if I could use an example, is let's pretend as a metaphor that I am the light. Okay, that's who I am. I'm the light. But if I'm a candle in the sun with 50 billion kajillion other candles, I can conceive of myself. I have a concept that I'm the light, but I can't experience what it's like to be the light because there's nothing else but the light in the sun. So if I want to experience being the light, I would have to go to a place where there is what? The darkness.
Yeah.
Which is what I am not. This is called the law of opposites, which is described in the book, Letters to a Young Seeker. The law of opposites says that in the absence of what you are not, what you are is not. You can't experience it. So when what you are not shows up in your experience, raise not your fist to heaven and curse the darkness not, but be a light unto the darkness, that you might know who you really are, and that all those whose lives you touch might know who they really are as well.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so beautiful and so profound at this time when we are just seeing out such tremendous playing out of darkness. And, you know, could we look at that then as our collective shadow? And what you're proposing here, in a way, you know, raise not a fist to the darkness, is like, you know, could that, whilst we don't sort of agree with what's happening, could we in some ways see that as a gift that enables us to see what we are not?
I think it's an opportunity. It's hard to use the word gift because people think of gifts as, something wonderful. But I do
Sure.
think I
Yeah.
would use the word opportunity. It's an invitation from life for us to decide who we really are in the presence of who we are not. So I get to decide, how do I want to experience that which I am in the presence of that which I am not? And when we decide the best way for us to do that, we move to a place in life that I call mastery. That's how people become masters on the planet. When the opposite of who we are shows up, judge not and neither condemn. He told us this 2,000 years ago. Judge not and neither condemn, but be a light unto the world, that you might know who you really are. And all those who have reached a level of mastery in the world have done exactly that.
It's what you're proposing sounds very simple, but actually, faced with the horrors of what we are experiencing at this time, it's kind of a difficult path, because the natural reaction is to judge it as wrong in a way. And another point that you make in the book is, and this really helped me with the whole, this whole polarity and how to overcome that was the whole piece about forgiveness. Because when something that appears, through our human awareness in our physical bodies to be creating harm and feels so apparently wrong, it's easy for us to go into judgment. And therefore, we are then creating a polarity which potentially can create more of the same. So the invitation to step past forgiveness and to step into understanding, I found incredibly helpful, not only for what is happening in the world, but what's, aspects of my own life, perhaps in my younger years, where I did things that I wouldn't choose to do now. It's like, as someone that wants to be a good person, it's like, it's easy to be hard on yourself, isn't it? But actually, I can understand, where I was at that time, that created those actions, and that now I wouldn't do those actions because my understanding is differently. So I feel that that's not something I've heard before. I've heard the forgiveness piece many times, but I feel that you really added something here that was really quite profound. Can you speak to this? I'm sorry if I've said too much there.
You said everything that I would say. The book Letters to a Young Seeker tells us in one of the many letters that the book contains, it tells us that understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master. And the example I like to use sometimes is that I do some spiritual coaching in a program that I call the Conversations with God spiritual mentoring program. And sometimes people come onto the program and they say, "Oh, I can't forgive my mother. I'll never forgive my mother for the way she treated me as a child. I'll never forgive what is unforgivable." And you know what's interesting? I say to that person, "Can you understand why she would have done that?" And the other person will say, "Oh, yeah, I can understand it. Her own mother did the same thing to her, and she lived in a terrible household, and there was, and I said, well, if you can understand it, that doesn't mean that you agree with it, that you condone it, that you approve of it, but it means that you do understand it. And if you understand it, then you don't have to forgive her. You simply are invited to understand how she could have behaved the way she behaved." And understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master. And then I tell my students, when you look into the mirror, tell yourself the same thing. When you look at yourself in the mirror and you realize that you've done things in your 20s and 30s that you would never do again. But if you can understand where you were coming from, how it happened that you said what you said or did what you did, how could you do such a thing? When you understand it, you don't have to forgive yourself. You merely have to look in the mirror and say, "I don't approve. I hope you never repeat it, but I do understand." And understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the master. And that's how we most effectively raise our children. When we understand how our children could be behaving the way they are behaving. And when we let them know, they don't have to be forgiven by us. All we have to do is say, "Sweetheart, Mommy understands. I hope you don't repeat that behavior because it's not very nice. It doesn't help you or anybody around you, but I understand how you could feel that way." Sarah, one of the biggest healing statements I ever made in a conversation with somebody, when I'm having a difference of opinion, I have one idea and they have another idea. I often say to them, "I can understand how you could feel that way." And they feel healed.
Yes.
I'm not even saying I agree with how you feel, but I can understand how you could feel that. And that closes the gap between us. And
that's what we're wanting to do at this polarized time. And what you're also offering is tremendous compassion, particularly with your example with children about, I understand, it's, rather than being punished, it offers tremendous compassion. And how do you feel this awareness of understanding offers opportunity for change and for healing?
Well, it offers the opportunity because when we understand how something could occur, we move from fault finding to compassion. Compassion replaces fault finding in the experience of the master. And so we no longer experience ourselves as making someone else wrong, finding fault. We simply have compassion. I want to make the point again that doesn't mean we agree with what they have said or done. It
Yes.
doesn't mean we hope that it will continue. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't offer our own point of view, which may be opposite from their point of view. But it does mean that we move from finding fault to expressing compassion. And if we have compassion for each other's weaknesses, we can change the world overnight.
Thank you so much for that awareness. I'm going to shift a little bit because there's kind of lots of points in your, although it's a very small book, it's very profound, and there's lots of conversation in those few pages. Then the next piece that I'd like to talk about was, one of the awarenesses that I shifted in myself. I was always the seeker, and what I realized at some point that was always coming from a place of lack, and that I had the realization that I am enough. It means I can still grow and evolve, but right now, as I am in this moment, just be yourself, be myself. There's a huge there was a huge healing in that for me. I'd love to talk about the shift in the worldview of there is enough, and what happens when we all shift into that awareness of there is enough, and out of this scarcity consciousness that we've all been brought up in, and the associated fear of there not being enough, is quite profound. It feels very scary to do that in a way, because in a way you could potentially just give away everything if you believe there's enough. You could, it's kind of, and want nothing. And that to me feels a little bit scary, but and that's kind of me being really honest there. That's something I feel I need to work on some more, this piece. I really saw something there. So please, can you help me kind of understand a bit better how to overcome fear around that? Because I'm sure many people have fear around this part.
All we have to do is look at the reality instead of what we think about the reality, but look at the actual reality. To give you a simple example, there's enough food to feed everybody on this planet. There's no reason, absolutely no reason, for 350 children to die on this planet every hour of starvation, when we throw away enough food in the restaurants of our world to feed an entire village for a week. There's enough of everything we need. All we have to do is share. All we have to do is stop competing with each other.
Yeah.
But we are competing with each other because we think there's not enough. But when we sit down at our dinner table with our family, surrounded by loved ones, we don't say to them, "Don't eat any more of that, there's not enough." Because we know that there's enough.
Yes.
When we are willing to share, and we are willing to share when we're sitting down with our loved ones. All we have to understand is that in life, all we are doing is sitting down with our loved ones. That everyone is a member of our family. And when we see everyone as a member of our family, then we will naturally share all that we have, and we will come to experience that, you know what? There was enough all along. All I had to do was share. There's enough money, there's enough compassion, there's enough understanding, there's enough patience, there's enough food, there's enough sex, there's enough, well, I'm not sure there's enough sex, but there's enough of everything else.
Enough time.
There's enough time, yes. Really,
Yes.
all joking aside, there's enough. And all we have to do is share that which we have.
It's interesting because many of the things you list, I feel that there's enough. And then, certainly the financial piece, I have to ask this question because, like you mentioned, starvation and in other countries and stuff like that. And I know this channel is called New Earth Co-Creators. So it's all about re-examining and re-looking and how can we create that new world that we wish to be part of, and it's an interesting time because how I see it is that we're at the current time sitting between stories. The old systems are clearly failing, and old systems are breaking down, but those new myths, those new stories haven't really yet taken hold. So it's a beautiful time to create those new stories. But if we're looking at that old world and those old systems, it just feels like there isn't enough, because the challenges on families are really extreme, and some families are even listening and thinking, actually, when I sit at the food table, maybe there isn't really even enough for my family to eat. So is that something you can speak to, the collective aspect of this?
Of course, there isn't enough. There really and truly isn't enough when those who have more than enough hoard what they have and collect even more of what they have and refuse to share on an equal basis. So if those who have more than enough are refusing to share, if they're hoarding and putting it away and not letting anyone else have any part of it, then there will be an experience of insufficiency. There's not enough because it's not being shared. That's why we have a world in which over 2.5 billion people do not even have clean water. That's crazy. Billions of people
It's really crazy.
have never had one drop of pure water in their lifetime, which is why they're dying like crazy from diseases because they can't even have clean water. It's not that we don't know how to create clean water for everybody. We simply refuse to do it. There are major pharmaceutical companies who refuse to sell medicine to people in certain third world countries because they don't have enough money.
Yes.
And the pharmaceutical companies can't make a big enough profit. So they don't sell the medicine, even though people are dying on the street from diseases that their medicines could help to alleviate. So, all we have to do is share. Or, as the man said 2,000 years ago, do unto others as you would have it done unto you. It's really quite simple, Sarah. It's really quite simple.
And community, that is, you spoke earlier about seeing all humans as our family. So that shift into, really honoring our community, but also our place in the community. And I'm just going to return to a question I was going to ask when I when I wanted to ask two questions earlier, because you spoke about that unity consciousness, that we're all one and that we are an individuated expression of that. And I wondered if you could explain a little bit more about what it means to be an individuated expression of all that is in this human form?
What it means to be an individuated expression is that we get to identify with specific characteristics that are ours and only ours. I mean, there are no two people exactly alike on this planet. And, or as the French would say, vive la différence. So there's a difference. But when I asked God to explain it to me, God said, Neale, hold up your hand. I said, okay. God said, how many fingers do you have? I said, well, I'm fortunate. I have all 5 fingers. God said, are they all the same? I said, no, none of them are the same. There are no 2 fingers that are alike. They're all different. Different shapes, different lengths, different sizes, different purposes, different functions. They're all different. God said, so they're individual. Does that mean that they're separate? I said, well, no, they're not separate. They're all connected in the same hand. And God said to me, sweetheart, you are all fingers on the hands of God. You're individual, but you're not separate. Because individuality and separation are not the same thing. You can be individual without being separate.
That brings me to another of your powerful reframes. Although you were speaking to young seekers, you mentioned, don't be the seeker, be the source. Because if we're seekers, we're looking for something outside ourselves, probably. And you're suggesting that we already have that. And even if we don't feel that we have it, it's like, know that we can bring that into the world, whatever it is that we're kind of looking for in a way.
Yes, because what goes around comes around. What we give to another, we give to ourselves for an elegant reason. There's nobody else in the room. There's only us. So what goes around comes around. And I've learned in my life that when I send out negative vibrations and negative energies, it comes back to me. And when I send out positive and loving vibrations and loving energy, that also comes back to me. So what goes around comes around. And I've learned in my life to be the source, not to be the seeker. God said to me, Neale, whatever you want more of in your life, give to another. And you will have an immediate experience that you not only had what you wanted more of, you actually had enough to give it away. You actually had enough to give some of it away. And so that was a great revelation in my life. Even when I was living on the street, for a year of my life, I spent a year living on the sidewalk because I had nowhere to live. And I couldn't get a job. I finally did find work, but it took many months for me to earn enough money to afford a little flat above somebody's garage. But for many months, for an entire year, I lived on the sidewalk. But what I learned was there's enough. Even if you're living on the street, there's enough. And so I went from person to person with my hand out. Could you possibly, maybe please give me a few coins? I don't even need any paper money, just some coins. Just is if I got a few coins from everybody, I could actually eat something today. I could buy a fast food hamburger somewhere. And I learned after living on the sidewalk for a year that there's enough. Because look, I'm still here. And I lived on the sidewalk with nothing. One pair of pants, one pair of shoes, 2 shirts, and that's it.
Thank you so much, Neale. This has been such a powerful conversation. I feel immensely, immensely grateful to have shared this time with you. And I'd love to ask you if you have any last message to young seekers in
Yes,
this now moment coming through right now.
my final message to young seekers would be, your life is not about you. Your life is not about you. Your life is about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. But when you experience your life in that way, you encounter the universal truth we've been talking about. Because as you experience others and treat others the way you feel is the best way you could possibly treat them, it comes back to you, because it turns out in truth, there is only one of us. So if I had a final message for young people, we don't have to compete with each other. Your life is not about you. Your life is about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. And when you touch other people's lives with peace, joy, freedom, and love, you will be happy in your own life. That's been my experience.
Thank you so much, Neale. I'm going to put your details in the video description on how people can get in contact with you and how to find your latest book. And this conversation is going to just stay with me, and I'm going to be it's really had a big influence, as did the last conversation. So I'm going to put the link just coming up shortly here, the link to that conversation as well. So I hope that everyone listening at home has got as much out of this as I have. And thank you so much again, Neale.
Thank you, Sarah, for letting me share with your audience information about the new book, Letters to a Young Seeker. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye for now. Thank you all for listening.